sitting in your own home and the electricity shuts off without any warning for hours. This is a problem facing millions of South Africans right now, night after night. There is not enough electricity to go around. And would you believe South Africa is one of the world's largest exporters of coal?
The Niger Delta in Nigeria is a region with huge oil deposits, but also faced with devastating effects from oil activities. Gas flaring is still a common practice by the multinational companies. They don't care about doing the right thing. I shed tears seeing the same multinationals do exactly the opposite in the Western world.
China, a land of wonder and beauty. The economy is growing dramatically, but the expansion of heavy industry leads to many environmental problems. Our greatest economic achievement, it is also our greatest burden. Now, my great motherland, China, is choking on its own success.
Around the world, people often talk about the destruction of the Brazilian rainforest. We Brazilians, we hate to admit it, but in fact, every single Brazilian ecosystem is endangered. And Brazil congratulates itself for being in the forefront of the global environmental talks. Don't get me started on a Rio+20 conference. Too many words, too little action.
In Norway, we have had a heated green debate for a long time. But what has really come out of it? We are one of the largest oil and gas exporters in the world. No doubt that we have a special responsibility to reduce the emissions of CO2.
I'm Christian, from Norway, and yes, I also love that music. But now, local politicians face huge challenges in their countries. How can they focus on their local causes, get re-elected, and at the same time solve global climate problems? Let us now see how politicians can solve the global climate problems and how we can help them to find future solutions.
It has been called the greatest scam ever performed on mankind and the greatest challenge ever faced by man. There are conventions and conferences held in its name. Hundreds of politicians are discussing. Thousands of scientists are releasing studies and reports documenting its harmful consequences. Despite all this, it looks like the world's politicians do not agree on climate change solutions.
The United Nations and the politicians have been working actively with climate change since 1988. But how much has been achieved? At the Earth Summit in Rio 1992, the Voluntary Agenda 21 on Sustainable Development was adopted. This year, Rio+20 followed up, but with no revolutionary outcomes. In 1997, Kyoto Protocol was signed. It's expiring this year. There were no new global agreements adopted at UN 2010 meeting in Copenhagen. or the 2011 meeting in Durban. Can we expect an agreement this year in Qatar? Speaking truthfully, the UN and the politicians have been unable to agree on common solutions so far.
Let's break down the paradox. Three forces: people's individual efforts, companies' use of market mechanisms, and political regulatory measures are interlinked and need to work together. The voluntary efforts of these forces has so far not solved global climate problems. That is why we need to find solutions that bridge the barriers between them. Politicians are elected by the people to find regulatory measures. Politicians must focus on voters' needs to get re-elected. But politicians tend to create extreme sides and either believe in climate change consequences or not. Could we move away from this polarized debate? People work in companies. Could there be a way to get people engaged in environmental solutions through business? Companies create the market mechanisms that adapt to the politicians' regulatory measures. Could there be a way for the market to adapt in a more efficient way?
As we can see, the politicians have so far not been able to solve the global climate problems alone. We believe that this can be solved, but not without everyone working together. The politicians, the people, and the companies. When working on this, we came to agree on three paths, or three solutions. And we had to, because our generation cannot hide. We need to provide energy for an ever-growing population, and at the same time, create a sustainable world. If such a young and diverse team like us can agree on common solutions, why shouldn't we expect that of our politicians?
Let us look at our first path. Our economy is said to depend on energy, and yet both are used by politicians for their uses. Politicians often create an extreme view in order for us, society, to pick a side. Here, for example, are two pro and anti-oil views following a recent incident in our industry. What you see here has got nothing to do with energy or the environment. This is politics, pure and simple. And Sarah Palin pictured there is the prime target. Do any of you here really think that either of these extreme views is correct? Are you not falling prey to political agendas if you do?
Politicians are often elected every 4 years, which means that every 4 years, energy and environmental planning also change. It's a roller coaster ride for the environment, as long as politicians keep changing. So how can we put energy planning on a much longer time scale?
And that's the question we need to ask. We need to somehow remove politics from energy. Look at central banks, the World Health Organization. We have global groups governing just about every crucial issue in our society. And why should energy or the environment be any different? If we truly hope at solving the global energy paradoxes that we face, we need a global energy board. And this is our first solution: establish a global energy board.
Let us look at our second path. Climate change is mostly discussed at a global level, but very little is done at the local level where climate issues originate from. In most countries, climate change still ranks below many other global issues, such as terrorism, healthcare, and poverty. But eventually, climate change will affect all of this and all of us.
Climate change initiatives, whether by people through non-governmental organizations or by companies through corporate responsibility, have not solved the world either. This is why we like to bring forward a new solution to bridge the gap between people's initiatives and the companies.
And this new solution, we call it environmental duty. Let me give you an example. Big companies have to provide a percentage of its workforce to tackle climate change issues. In this way, we will be able to bridge the gap between companies and the people.
This sounds very nice on paper, but now we have to ask, is this really a good idea? Don't you think some companies may take this as an opportunity for more greenwashing, more advertising, and even more empty environmental promises?
Yes, that is possible. But remember, nothing works in a blink of an eye. And the energy board we just proposed will help to establish this. Besides removing politics from energy planning and engaging enough people in climate issues, we still need an effective market. So, environmental duty and public enlightenment is our second path.
At last, let us look at our third path. But first, let's go to a small town named Huiteng Xile at Inner Mongolia, China.
Look at that wide and beautiful grassland. Apart from the sheep, we heard some loud noise in the background.
Well, let me explain it further. The loud noise you heard from the background, it's the noise from the wind turbines. In that windy countryside, the local government find out the best tailor-made energy solutions. Many wind power plants have been built in that area by the international companies. Instead of using the traditional coal power plant, the wind energy has been used, and this will give a large reduction of CO2 emissions.
This is a great way for companies to work with the local government to use new technology solutions. It seems like local tailor-made solutions are needed to help solve this environmental program. So what more can we learn from this specific case in China?
That is a very good question. Well, we all know that the global climate problems are very complicated. But we can break the big problems into small ones. If the local government can find out the best tailor-made solution for the locals, we can solve the problems case by case. We act locally, but still have a global impact. And this, my dear audience, it's our third path, to find out the best tailor-made local solutions.
And these three solutions or paths fit perfectly together in our model, providing us with a roadmap to help the politicians and the world to move forward in the right direction. But now we want to challenge you. Many of you, or I can see most of you, are from international companies. You see the global picture and the local challenges. You understand how politics affect your business and vary from country to country.
We just don't have the time to wait for politicians to solve the global energy paradoxes we face. And that's why our solutions depend on you, the companies. If we have any hope of solving these paradoxes we face, we need all of your help.
Take, for instance, the issue of gas flaring. You have to help and implement the same best practice everywhere, like you do, for instance, in the North Sea.
By being a sustainable business, you create your future instead of waiting for the politicians. After all, the business of business is to stay in business.
Stick to health, safety, and environment policies on a global scale. Challenge each other. Work with your local partners and the local politicians to raise the bar.
You know where to start in the countries where you do business.
We have the privilege here to gaze into the future and see what needs to be done. Now join us in making this happen.
Our first path. By establishing a global energy board, we will be able to remove politics from energy planning and plan for the future on a much longer timescale.
Our second path, by introducing an environmental duty where companies have to work together in order for us to bridge the gap between people and companies.
Our third path, by focusing on tailor-made local solutions, many small local initiatives will have a global impact.
You, as businesses, have a special responsibility because you see the big picture and you see the big solution. With your effort, there is now hope to bring these solutions forward.
Wait a minute, everyone. Why should we really care about all of this? What do we all have in common? You, me, all of us. We all have, or will have, children and grandchildren, or people that we care about, that is going to live on this planet after us. We cannot hand over such a big problem to be solved only by our politicians.
Now we want our solutions and motivation to be your inspiration. Whether you're in politics or in business, we are all part of this globe. Now the challenge is yours.
1, 2, 3.